Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Comedian Kevin Hart is caught in the middle of a firestorm over words he may or may not have said pertaining to Egyptians and Blackness. But the central issue is how Egyptians identify. We will discuss. Also, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is about to wrest total control of state colleges and universities and institute a curriculum that would force faculty to teach only about things like the Federalist Papers, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. The bill would not only eliminate all forms of critical race theory, but would completely ban any teaching about diversity, equity, inclusion, and women's rights. We will have details. And the creator of Dilbert comic strip is in hot water over a racist rant. The fallout is huge. But first, the Black press has requested the 41,000 plus hours of security footage from the January 6th insurrection after House Speaker Kevin McCarthy gave access to Fox News. And now other outlets have also petitioned the speaker. We discussed this morning with Bobby Henry, the publisher of the West Side Gazette, and Katrina Hamilton. Good morning.
Good morning to all.
Good morning.
Good to see you both. We start this morning, Bobby and Katrina, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the trade association of the more than 230 African-American newspapers and media companies in the United States, has asked House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to share the same 41,000 plus hours of security footage from the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol that he shared with Fox News. Following the NMPA's request, other media outlets like CNBC, MSNBC, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and the New York Times have also petitioned Congress for the footage. In a letter to the Speaker, NMPA President and CEO Dr. Benjamin Chavis and the NMPA Chair Karen Carter Richards says this is a serious matter of equal access to government information to the Black press of America, represented by the NMPA, and in specific reference to the fact that you have set a precedent by providing the footage to Fox News. Bobby, you're a publisher with an NMPA paper, the West Side Gazette, down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's important that the Black press also get access, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Equal access is what it's all about. However, my question is, are we missing anything? Did we get the total synopsis or the total picture of what actually happened? Will we see more in the footage that we're getting? Are we missing anything?
Well, here's the thing. Here's what Congressman Benny Thompson told us on this program just last week. That footage that they gave to Fox News, is a lot of problems with it. It opens up really a security risk. It is a national security risk, and it's a risk to Congress because there is cameras and angles that only Congress knew about and should know about because of security issues. This giving it to Fox News, another thing that Benny Thompson, the congressman out of Mississippi, told us too, was he basically gave it to someone who is in a lawsuit about their coverage, their misinformation about what happened on January 6th. So you gave them, in particular, Tucker Carlson, this footage. There's a problem there, a major problem, when no one else apparently signed off on the speaker giving Fox News this footage. 41,000 plus hours of footage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a door, that's a Pandora's box being opened in terms of security and everybody being able to see and could therefore use this thing in a subversive manner. So yeah, we have the right to get it.
We do, and Paris Brown from the Baltimore Times writes in, why would they give it to a media outlet without integrity? And I go back to, again, Congressman Benny Thompson, who was the chair of the select committee that investigated the January 6th insurrection. He said it seems like it's some sort of payoff or payback to Fox News for all of what they did to try and give this information about the January 6th attacks. So this is, Katrina, what world we now live in, where you have the majority party in the House, deciding that it's okay to release interests of national security to Fox News?
Well, Stacey, I think the bigger question is why are we focused on securing this footage when we already know what happened, and why aren't we looking at dealing with Kevin McCarthy, because obviously he's a security risk at this point. And so there should be some type of call for his removal from office, because this is a huge threat to not only his constituency, but the entire country.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
already know
without
what
question.
happened on January 6th. Why are we going back to that?
Well, without question. And once again, I refer back to what Congressman Thompson said. If that were he or another member, specifically somebody who looks like him,
Mhm.
Mhm,
or a Democrat, he says it violates their oath of office and it
mhm,
violates the law. So you're looking at two major consequences, right?
right.
Mhm.
Criminally, and of course, like you said, being removed. But this Republican controlled House, this conservative controlled House, or whatever you want to call them, the MAGA controlled House, really,
Mhm.
is not going to move on that. And the surprising thing, there's no real uproar outside of Congress.
And that's what I was gonna say, Stacey. Like, I think that what we as an NPA should do is try to create that uproar, right? And work with Congressional Black Caucus and others to create that uproar, like they would do. I mean, one of the reasons why they get where they get is because of the ruckus that they make. It's only a small percentage of them, but they make so much noise that they do gain control. So it's time for us to just stop looking at, okay, yeah, look at what they did and say, okay, this is what they did, and this is how they violated it, and this is what we need to do about it.
Yeah, like Brother Thompson said, I'm concerned about is this a payoff? I mean, obviously McCartney has sold his soul to get where he is. So
Yes.
this in to help build up his, his this image of him selling out and doing anything he can to stay in power. Is that's what's happening? So
Yeah, and Power 96 writes in the same thing, Bobby, that Kevin McCarthy sold his soul to become the speaker. So he's
Mhm.
not surprised at anything or by anything that Kevin McCarthy does. And David Youngblood says it's to give the information to Vladimir Putin. Those angles and the national security information is to give it all to the Russian president. And so, and just to top it off, Austin Cooper, good morning, Austin. He says McCarthy has compromised the security of the U.S. Capitol forever.
mhm.
And you may forget officers died in that attack. These are people who claim to be about law and order, but it was police, Capitol Police, and District Police who lost their lives, either during or as a result of the attack on the Capitol. So really, really interesting. The NMPA has petitioned for access to the footage as well. So we will see what happens. But Bobby, we gotta go down to your neck of the woods, and perhaps what some say, and I can't say I
Mhm.
disagree,
Mhm.
the most racist,
Yeah.
sexist, homophobic, xenophobic bill crafted since the end of slavery, perhaps even before that.
Yeah.
Florida
Yeah.
Governor Ron DeSantis and his Republican cronies have authored a bill that takes, quote, breathtaking control of viewpoint and content throughout all academic activity in the entire Florida system. And look, you can look it up. HB 999 is the bill. It says that all colleges and universities must not spend money on education programs or other things that support diversity, equity, inclusion, or anything related to teaching critical race theory. Someone says this bill is a roadmap for wrecking one of our great state systems of higher education. That's someone with the University of Michigan law professor Julian Davis Mortensen. The bill mandates that the Federalist Papers must be taught, the Bill of Rights must be taught, and the U.S. Constitution, but nothing else
So
as
you
far
mean
as race.
Yeah, you mean to tell me so we can't talk about David Walker's appeal? We can't teach that. We can't teach the true history. What our governor has done is he has how should I say that? Put us in a position where Florida students will come in behind the eight ball when it comes to being educated, when it comes to the full awareness. When you're talking about discontinuing the AP program or even the SAT test, you're creating a misinformed society. So yes, him and his whole racist mentality, his whole being is about being subjecting people to not knowing who they are. Now, in all of this, he has not said anything against Trump, nothing. So this
Trump has
coward,
certainly said some things against him.
yeah, he's a coward, man. He the old street game of 3-card Molly or watch the P. DeSantis is creating some ruckus over here so he can slide something in over here, and this education, the dumbing down, if you will, or just total neglect of our history is just another page out of Hitler's book. It's just he is creating his stay woke has woken some people up that I think is going to backfire against him. What he hopes to be able to move him forward is actually going to take him down. So,
Hey, Bobby, in Florida, what are you seeing in Florida as a reaction to this? I mean, you're there on the ground. Your newspaper is one of the best in the state. What are you seeing?
We have to stop working in silos. We got different organizations, different people doing different things. Yeah, we had a march in Tallahassee, sponsored by our Senator Chevron Jones, which brought in Al. And then we have the NAACP doing one thing, other grassroots organizations doing something else. We don't have the cohesiveness that is needed from all organizations to come together and put up one big front. If we're doing things in silos in different places, we can be picked off easily because we're not coming together to form this coalition that's needed to attack this bully, hit him in the mouth with everything we got collectively. So what we're finding out, Stacey, is that we are working in silos. We're not working together. And so we got to come together. We got to get the NAACP, the Urban League, the whatever other organization, grassroots organizations, our Black legislators, our leaders, our preachers, to come together and put up a unified front. We don't have that just yet. We're still working in different pockets. And by doing that, we are segregating and disenfranchising all of us when we need to come together. So that's what we're seeing here on the ground. That's what people are talking about. Yes, we are angry. Yes, we want to fight. Yes, we want to do something. But where do we come together to get this done? Collectively.
David Youngblood writes in the same thing. He says, this will not succeed if we don't show up at their schools, boycott every school. My brother-in-law and my Amtrak brother, Quinn Durrett, it says, is real history too much to bear? To them, it seems like it is, Quinn. And Power 96, you can't teach anything about the U.S. Constitution without teaching about the enslavement of Black people. 3/5 is the original U.S. Constitution. And finally, I'll leave it with David. He says, a day without Black people would make the point. How about that, Katrina? A day without Black people would make the point. I guess enough said right there. We'll continue to watch that. And I know the West Side Gazette will continue to be following this. Claudette Perry, here's a question, and I'm glad she raised this question. Bobby, perhaps you can answer this before we move on. Claudette Perry says that she asks, could the president sign an executive order to federally mandate that all history is American history?
That's a question to be visited, if he would do that. But I want to just digress just a little bit. We had a university to stage a walkout, and there were no HBCUs involved with that. There was a white university. So until until our Black teachers, our HBCUs, until we say, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to teach this. We're going to do this, or else you got to, we're not going to come in.
I just have to interject really quickly. As an educator, I can't I want to be mindful of the time, but I can't sit back silently for much longer. One of the issues
Well,
too
that's the
with our
point of you being here. Speak up.
okay,
Speak
thank
up.
you. Because part of our HBCUs, a lot of our HBCUs are private institutions. While the governor can mandate all he wants, private institutions have jurisdictions on what they will and what they will not teach. And so a lot of this has to do with our public institutions, looking at our majors, our Africana studies majors, our Latino studies majors, and so the Latinos who supported DeSantis are now really ticked off with him too, because they see this as a backlash to not only African studies but to Hispanic studies when it comes up, or Chicano studies. So you're going to hear much more about this issue. It's not
Mhm.
going to fly because it really a lot of folks get to the university so that they can learn about history and they can have a choice. So DeSantis can do all he wants. He will lose the presidency if he decides to when he decides to win or whatever, and he will probably, compromise his governorship as well. But going back, the HBCUs, they are looking, and they're also in they will still teach Black studies. They've been teaching Black studies, before other universities. PWIs have been teaching Black studies. So
Mhm.
I think, but I hear your issue though.
Yeah,
Your bigger issue is our youth have to get out there and fight
let's see it.
and
Mhm.
yeah. Well, let's be honest too. Our kids are tired. Black folks are tired. We always, fighting and protesting, and there's just so many things to fight and protest for. Sometimes you get exhausted. You have fatigue, what we call racial
Isn't that
battle
the point too?
fatigue.
Part of the
I
point? Isn't that
Yeah,
part of the point that what they're doing, throwing all this out there, to tire you out, to make you
Yes,
mhm.
fatigue? Because this bill, listen, it's not just about critical race theory. The bill also eliminates
gender
women's and
studies.
gender studies
Yes,
Mhm,
as a
yes.
as a
Don't
major
say
or a
hate.
minor.
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, yeah. But we cannot be tired. When you said that, Sister Katrina, my mind went back to that. I is no ways tired. We can't do that. We cannot take on that attitude. No matter what we are presented with, we got to fight on. We still got to fight on. Yeah, we're tired, broken, beat, and all of that. But I'd be doggone if I'm gonna lay down and let this boy, tell our state that we cannot tell our children who we are and where we came from. And if nobody else said, I'm gonna say it. I
Well,
can be
no,
tired and
and
broken.
I appreciate that too, and I think the other part too is let other people get out there. If this is gender studies, we know that with affirmative action, white women have
Another story.
benefited. That's a
Hmm.
whole other story, but they've
Hmm.
benefited from affirmative action. So let them get out in the
Hmm.
forefront and fight about the gender studies, and then we'll join them.
Come
I mean,
on.
we can't do everything.
We
Well,
got to do everything.
We no, but we've been
I,
doing
I,
everything. And look at where we are, and everybody steps on our backs to get what they need.
okay,
Stacy?
it's a mighty horse
Co-
who wag his own tail. So, and if we're waiting for somebody else to wag, no, we got to we and
It's in motion. It's in motion. So we'll join our HBCUs. They'll join, but
I'm not.
let them get it
I went
on
to
first.
3 different HBCUs.
Yes,
My
sir.
my children did too.
Yes,
So
sir.
but I just want to see us out there. We coveted what we see first. If I don't see any HBCUs out there fighting for this cause, then what am I to think? I mean,
Mhm.
if I don't see somebody that looks like me, again, and Lord knows we need everybody to get in this. Those who have benefited off our backs, yeah, y'all need to come out. The LGBTQT, the everybody, the white women, the white men, everybody who has prospered off the backs of black folk need to be out here speaking up against this, is against what is happening. I'm glad to see it. What was it? Was it in what was the state? Baltimore? Where it was somewhere, Maryland, somewhere where they were actually protesting. DeSantis came to speak somewhere. Might have been New
Mm.
York.
New York. It was New
Yeah,
York.
yeah, yeah. And they no man, we don't do it. We don't do it that way.
Yep.
Now I read a story where this inmate who was being executed, who
Yes, I saw that too.
who
I saw
told
that too.
who told him exactly what needed to what needed to happen. I can't say it on this show in the
Yep.
way he said it, but you know,
Yeah.
hey, and,
And
between,
this was a white man too,
yeah, yeah,
who made that
yeah,
that on death row just before they executed him.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
coming up in a moment, we're gonna talk about the Kevin Hart situation in Egypt. But first, Dilbert comic strip creator Scott Adams experienced possibly the biggest repercussion of his recent comments about race when distributor Andrews McMill Universal announced yesterday that it would no longer work with the cartoonist. Andrews McMill chairman Hugh Andrews and CEO and president Andy Sarayan said in a joint statement that the syndication company was severing our relationship with Adams. In the February 22nd episode of his YouTube show, Adams described people who are Black as members of a hate group from which white people should get away. And various media publishers across the U.S. denounced the comments as racist, hateful, and discriminatory, while saying they would no longer provide a platform for his work. You know, everybody is showing their true colors now. There's no question about it. You know, no matter, we talk from politics to comic strips, everyone is really, and I think there's something good about that, right? Because here's the thing: the reason I say this, there's something good about it. I was born and raised in New York, lived most of my life in New York. I lived in Los Angeles for about 7 years, and I always say the difference. People ask me the difference, and the biggest difference for me, and I know a lot of people will not like this, but it's the truth. The biggest difference in New York, if somebody likes you, if somebody hates you, you know about it. You never know about it in Los Angeles. You got to guess. So everybody's putting it out there now. And I think the advantage is that you absolutely know where they're coming from.
Wow.
Well, I'm a native Californian, and I absolutely agree with you. I had an opportunity to work in New York, but that's so true. It's all my life, and I shouldn't throw my age out there, but I'm almost half a century, and it was kind of like growing up. You're thinking, why do I not know how this person really feels about me? I mean, I can see the way they're treating me, but they'll never say it because, they feel like they're woke, as the people will say, or they're anti-racist. And when we look at, I grew up in Inglewood and we had the South Bay. So there was Torrance, and a lot of those towns are historically known as sundown towns. So when our kids would play at Morningside and Inglewood High School, Lisa Leslie, all of them, we'd go over and, a lot of our young kids couldn't even drive over there at a certain point because they would always be racially profiled and ticketed. And that's because of the, just the discrimination and the hate that these people felt for us. But you would never know it because they'll smile on your face, right? And, I don't want to start
What they
saying
do,
all
that's
the
what that song,
right.
they smile in your face.
The
What they do.
backstabbers, right? But they're backstabbers. And that's what we see in schools. And that's why we have this pushback again against, what they claim is CRT, which is not. It's just really teaching history, all history. And I think Claudette Perry's statement about all history, we would not have this issue if it was all history. We wouldn't have people treating us this way if they really knew about history as a whole. We're Americans. And so our history needs to be told so we can start being rehumanized, as one sister put it in an article. Not dehumanized, but rehumanized. And I see the caption up right now.
I believe, and I'm having hope. I had some work to be done at our home, and the gentleman that came to do the work is a white guy. So we were having a conversation. I have come to realize that a person who has been through something, whatever struggle, whatever discrimination, whatever malintent that they were subjected to, they can understand, what we feel, not necessarily the total scope of it, but what we feel. This gentleman that I had a conversation with was a recovering alcoholic. So in understanding his plight and what he went through, he understood. In his words, he said, I was taught that Black people were all wrong. They were just bad. But when he went through his thing, he's been sober now for almost 19 years, I think. But when he went through his part, his degradation, his downfall, his just lost everything, he understood, or he has begun to understand what we as a people might feel because of what he went through. So if you haven't went through anything, if you haven't dealt with the lowest points in your lives, it's hard for you to identify or understand a person in their plight. So we need those who have been through some troubled times, if you will, to understand exactly what we're going through and to join us in this fight. And I hope I said what I was trying to say correct.
Yes,
I,
sir.
I think
Oh, go
so.
ahead, Stacy. I was just going to say too that we, also have to, and I definitely agree, um, Mr. Henry, that we need to do that. But we also have to look at our positive stories, right? When we talk about Black, it's always from a deficit thinking model. It's always from just, we don't want to erase our history, but we do have many stories, about success and triumph, and we rarely talk about those stories. And
Yeah,
so,
unless you're reading the Black press. There's
Mhm,
plenty of
exactly.
those stories in the Black
In
press.
the Black press, so it's kind of like, how do we get that as a part of just, again, regular curriculum? When schools are looking and subscribing to the Los Angeles Times or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, they should also be subscribing to our, gazettes and our, sentinels and our Muslim journals and all of our papers that are part of the NNPA, about a part of the Black press,
Yeah,
because that's where they're going to get the knowledge.
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Power 96 writes that Scott Adams said his quiet part out loud. He says, I bet Tim Scott, Candace Owens,
mm,
Uncle Clarence Thomas are asking Scott Adams not to include them in that Black category. And David Youngblood says, to have suffered much allows you the ability to empathize with others. After all, we are all human. And Paris Brown, the managing editor of the Baltimore Times, says, yes, the Baltimore Times, positive stories about positive people. And that is their motto. If you ever pick up a copy of the Baltimore Times, that's what it says: positive stories about positive people.
mhm.
And Joy Bramble, the publisher there, as always, I mean, she started that Baltimore Times in her living room in 1985, I believe it was, and it's been all positive about positive people all the time. And Claudette Perry says, in some cases that could be true, but when people vote, the MAGAs are poor whites in many cases, but vote against their own interest. That part is definitely true too. They vote against their own interest. It's that quintessential cutting your nose to spite your face.
They're
Bobby.
scared. They're
Mhm,
fearful, right? They're fearful that if we start telling the truth, then they're going to get even less. And that it's all about fear. So
Mhm,
that's why
mhm,
when you're scared, you're going to vote against your interest.
mhm.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're so caught up in yourself. You don't want. You're so fearful that, man, they're gonna do the same thing to us that we did to them. They might have a flashback when my great granddaddy had them. What are they
That's
gonna
why they don't want to lose
do?
guns. That's why
Yeah,
they don't want to lose guns.
yeah, yeah.
Because if they lose guns, then it's over for them. It's
Hmm,
easy to shoot someone, but it's harder to fight.
hmm. I
I saw. I'm sorry, Katrina. I
no,
have
no.
to share this. And maybe she could pull it up right quick. Greer sent me. I never watched Little House on the Prairie. Let me say that I never watched that show. I could not even bear to sit and watch something like that. Just couldn't.
What?
However, I never knew. The what you talking about, Willis? What's his name? Todd Bridges
Hmm,
Yeah.
from Different Strokes actually was on that show. I don't know if it was more than this appearance or just this appearance, but he said something so powerful. This clip that Greer sent to me, and it starts off, and there it is. In fact, if she can play that instead of me narrating it, that would be fantastic. You have to take a look. I don't think we have audio on it. So I will just go ahead for the sake of time narrate it, but as you watch it, in that scene right there at the school, she's asking him basically, what doesn't he like about himself or whatever. And he says, being a nigger.
Mm.
And then in this scene, it switched to this scene with Michael Landon. And Michael Landon is kind of chastising, well, why would you say that?
Being a
And
nigga
he
killing my
said,
pa.
and
Let me
he,
ask me something, sir.
there you go.
If I can.
Would you like to live to be 100?
Sure, I would. It's not very likely, but I guess all of us like to live to a ripe old age.
Would you rather be black and live to be 100, or white and live to be 50?
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you, how powerful was that little scene right there? How powerful was that?
It still applies today, right?
Mm.
When we look at our black males and our
She
black
sent me
females.
that. I was blown away. Because like I said, I never watched that show.
I did, unfortunately. Sorry, Stacey.
That's okay. That's okay. My
I don't
mama
let my
watched it.
students read it anymore, but still.
But your thoughts on that real quick. I mean, I know it's a little off track.
And
You know,
it
but
still applies today. It kind of talks about everything that we're talking about, right? You know, because these are the folks, they grew up in that time, in that era, and they don't look at us as human. And so basically, it's kind of like he's asking him, would you rather be a human, right? In America, we know we're human. So let's please, I don't want anyone to misquote me and say that I said we were not human. We
Right.
were the first humans. Let's
Get
be
it right.
clear, right? But he's asking him, would you rather walk around as a human or walk and live to be 50, half the age? Or would you rather be dehumanized and be looked upon as less than a human and miserably live until 100?
Yeah. I that teaching moment. So whoever the writer was that wrote that into the script, you know, I really applaud that person, because that took some, you know, you actually now are you engaging folk. Now you're giving us something to think about, like we're
Yes.
doing now, years later. Now we're thinking about it. So, but here we have people who can sympathize and empathize with us, but they don't take it to the next level. They just leave it right there for that time for them to
Yes.
enjoy and not take it to the fullness where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So I, the person who wrote it into that
Yeah,
script.
I just found that to be incredible. I stopped in my tracks, you know, trying to enjoy my weekend.
Mhm.
And Greer says, no, we still got work to do. And she sends me that. Claudette Perry says, remember when Mike Tyson said to his interviewer, I'm rich and you wouldn't want to be me because I'm black. Yeah, and I remember I'll go a little one further with that. A young Michael Jackson has set the world on fire in America. He was very young at the time, 10 years old, 12 years old, something of that nature. Flew to Australia, got off the plane to reporters. A reporter stopped Michael at the airport. He's a little 10, 11, 12-year-old Michael Jackson. And he said, and he got all this reception, all these fans there. How does it feel to come over here and be treated like a king, but you just a nigger in America? A white reporter said that. Look it up. There's still clips of that little so-called interview. So just think about that and just look at what we've been talking about, that little scene there from Little House on the Prairie, and then think about what they are doing today.
Yeah, that reporter was actually calling Michael a nigger. He didn't give him no credit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Jerry Lee Lewis can go over there with his 12-year-old cousin wife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can go on and on. Katrina Hamilton says she writes on our private chat, James Baldwin.
I ain't that Negro.
And Tupac,
Yeah.
even Tupac, you know, he said, I can't even live. You all are saying I make all this money, but I can't live in Beverly Hills because I don't feel comfortable around people I haven't grew up with. And I can't live in the hood because he said, you know, brothers and sisters will rob me. So what do I do?
What do I do? Wow. That's powerful too, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, folks, Kevin Hart has reportedly lost a gig in Egypt due to his, quote, Afrocentric views. The comedian was scheduled to perform in Nasser City at the Cairo International Stadium on February 21st during his reality check comedy tour. And according to the Egypt Independent, the comedian's show was canceled due to, quote, local logistical issues. However, Al Manator claims the performance was canceled due to Hart's comments last December when he allegedly said that ancient Egypts were Black. Katrina, I know you know this story well. What went on there, and why?
Well, I know some folks don't like the word intersectionality, but I will say that, be me, of course, you're looking at me. I'm at the intersection of being Black and Muslim, and I've been both all my life. And so I have an opportunity to not only know about this Kevin Hart story, but to have lived experience with my Egyptian brothers and sisters. And so the reality is, most Egyptians, and I say most, and this is Greer pulled this up, they do not believe that they were Kemetic or Nubian or Black. They believe that they're Arab. Right now, there's a concerted effort to, I don't know if anyone has heard the term MENA, but it is Middle Eastern North African. So they, because of their language, believe that they are Arab and not Black. And when you go and you look at places like Alexandria, where it's closer to the Mediterranean Sea, a large percentage of those folks share DNA with, Romans, Italians, and we know about all of the conquering. But to say Black in Egypt is almost like, to an Arab, is almost like basically calling them the N-word. And that's what we're really dealing with. We are dealing with the effects of imperialism. We are dealing with the effects of Eurocentrism and the fact that, they still treat the Sudanese, like they are dirt. And honestly, the upper Nile is basically Sudan, which was modern day Kemet. I mean, ancient Kemet and ancient Nubia. So we have to look at our history and understand. Even when I went to Egypt some years ago, I was walking around and they were yelling at me, Africa. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I thought I was in Africa, right? And so we have to really understand the dynamics and the duality. And then the other thing too is in Egypt, right now you have people who are various different complexions. You have the lighter of the light, you have the darkest of the dark, and even the darkest person would consider to be, like what we would call light skin, right? Or unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters in the South would say red bone. And so you have these complexities of, or these different varieties of complexions. And they're looking at Kevin Hart and they're looking at him saying, you are not of us. They don't look at the fact that the Sphinx had the Negroid nose or the broad nose and all of that. They could not care less. It is really about hierarchy and being closer to Arab and not even understanding that Arab is a mixture of folks, right? That's a whole nother conversation. But, it's really about not wanting to be Black.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Well, Kevin Hart said, quote, he's quoted as saying, we must teach our children the true history of Black Africans when they were kings in Egypt and not just the era of slavery that is cemented by education in America. Do you remember the time when we were kings? Whether ancient Egyptians were Black has been long debated by historians. Bobby, go ahead.
Yeah, man. The sister, she educated me today, and and but to what I know of, and it couldn't hold a eye drop of water to what Katrina said. I'm thinking Old Devar Gorge, wherever the first structure of man was found, I thought it was in Africa, so therefore, for me, if that's where, quote unquote, leaking them, the scientists, they just happen to be white, said that's where we originated from. So all my life, that's what I believed. And then further reading and learning, when you begin to go back and go from one book to another, no matter where you go in that, there's some blackness there, of what I consider to be black. So if the beginning is black, then everything evolves from that. Then we all come from black. That was my thought. That's my thought. So when we get into this word play, the same from black to Negro to whatever
Colored.
Colored, it all goes back to the same. A rose by any other name, no matter how sweet the smell, it's still a rose. So that's where I am.
Well, here's from a 2012 column in the Daily News of Egypt. It says the Sahara Desert has been viewed as a vast, impenetrable barrier dividing our continent into two distinct areas, northern, quote, white, and sub-Saharan, quote, black Africa. The countries south of the Sahara have long been considered authentically African, while those to the north have been perceived as Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, or Islamic. While most anthropologists refute this perception of Africa as inaccurate, it has nevertheless influenced the way people think about the continent and our region in particular. Apparently, it has also impacted the way Egyptians view themselves. Many Egyptians are oblivious to their Africanness, failing to identify themselves as Africans. When confronted with the reality of their African roots, some Egyptians are stunned, others reluctant to acknowledge that fact. Also, I'll lift this up, Katrina, and throw this back to you. A 2011 article done by NPR says over the years, Egypt has had a particularly difficult time coming to grips with its African identity. Many Egyptians do not consider themselves African. Some take offense even to being identified with Africa at all. When speaking to Egyptians who have traveled to countries below the Sahara, nearly all of them speak of going to Africa or going down to Africa as if Egypt were separate from the rest of the continent. More than a few Egyptian women, for example, said that they disliked the dark-skinned former president Anwar Sadat, and they ridiculed for years as Nasser's black poodle.
Yes, Anwar Sadat, again, Nubian, right? Bobby, I'm looking at you, and Anwar Sadat was like your complexion, right? That he was considered this, and I could still remember when Anwar Sadat was assassinated, and I think I was 4 years old.
Oh, I was just talking about that
Right?
recently, Katrina.
Yes, with Jimmy Carter, right? And I just, to this day, it's painful because when Anwar Sadat became president, Prime Minister of Egypt, we were like, celebrating because it was a victory for Black Muslims. It was a victory for us as people because we were like, wow, look at our brother over there in Egypt. But one of the things that we have not talked about is the caste system that is in Egypt, right? And you can see that even in the hieroglyphics. And so there, again, it's really this connotation of Black being negative. Europeans, white folks have done an amazing job of making everyone, even our own people, hate themselves, right? And look at these beautiful photos. Like, again, race is a social construct when you really look at history. And as people, we moved all over. That's why we got to where we were, because we moved everywhere. If we really look at it, and people hate us to say this, but everyone is Black, right? Because they come from that seed, whether they're light or dark, whatever, but it's really the culture. But the other part too is that when we're looking at all of this history, we have to look at the way that borders were created, again, by Europeans. Was there really a border between Egypt and Sudan before? Right? Sudan and Egypt were one. When you look at it on the map, both Sudan and Egypt, the only thing that separates Saudi Arabia from Sudan and Egypt is the Red Sea.
Well,
so go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to mention a couple of comments. Austin Cooper says the reality is that some white folks look down on all people of color. A racist cop will not distinguish between Black or Arab at a traffic stop. Claudette Perry mentioned something I thought was interesting. Malcolm X, she says, Malcolm X said, Egypt is a different kind of beast. Those who practice Islam are of all shades. Black Arabs are actually conquering specific parts of Africa even today. But that's a whole different conversation. And Power 96 says, let's keep it real. Those Mediterranean Arabs are responsible for the Atlantic slave trade.
That's
A
right.
lot of them, and a lot of them did participate, right? Again,
Mhm.
and then there were, those of us who are our own complexion, our own tribes, so does too. So that's a whole different conversation. And I think that, slavery, in their mind, some folks can say that they didn't think it was going to be this horrific. Well, that's fine, but it did happen. But I just want to share one quick story, if I can, and it's really about like the borders and these boundaries that these folks came in. Egypt and Sudan and Ghana, these are not even our ancient names, right? Africa is not even the ancient name. These are names that they gave us and gave our places. And so I was talking to my husband who's Ghanaian, and his tribe was a smaller tribe. It's a Chamba tribe. And he got really emotional when I said, well, your folks are really in Togo. You're not Ghanaian. And my daughter started, my whole life is a lie. I'm not Ghanaian. And she started crying. He said, look what you did. And I said, well, I'm only looking at facts. And he said, no. He said, our people started off in northern part of what is now known as Ghana. And he said, because we're nomadic, and most African tribes are, we moved, right? We moved to Togo. And and some of us remained in Ghana. But he said, we've been marginalized. And that's what has happened to our Black Egyptians. They have been marginalized because they are now, it's like you're codified, you are only in Sudan. You are not an Egyptian because now with colonialism and imperialism, because they've never really been colonized, they have marginalized our Black Africans, our Black Egyptians. And that's really what it goes down to or boils down to. And it's unfortunate that no matter how much money, getting back to Kevin Hart, no matter how much money Kevin Hart is, he goes to Egypt and it's called an Afrocentric. And Afrocentric is even a bad word in Egypt. Can you imagine?
Mm.
No, when we went to Morocco on this visit, that was an eye-opening experience for me. We flew from Rabat all across, and we flew across the desert, and so I'm saying, well, I don't see how this is separated from that. And Sister Katrina, when you mentioned the borders, if we go back and look at the earlier maps, we can see that there were no borders. It was just this vast country, and being migratory. I mean, migrating, migrate is nomadic or whatever. So I can see planting the seed here, planting the seed there, planting the seed here. Even though we're all in different places, you said it. We came from that one seed. That is us. And if we could get to that point to understand that and not be separated by the same boundaries that were created geographically or geologically, and just deal with who we are as human beings, we might come out whole better. I mean, we might, get to the point where we really need to be, understanding that race thing was created by them to separate us. So,
Well, even in the Quran, I'm sorry to say, but I'm not sorry to say, but even in the Quran, there's a word that describes Adam, and Adam is said to be Black. And people, Arabs, they like, that's not true. It's like, well, how can you say it? It's right there, And so, we've got, it is psychological, really. It is psychological.
yeah, dog,
Well,
we had it all over the world.
Right? How do we overcome this?
Yeah. Start with us.
Right.
wow.
You
Well,
educated me this morning.
we haven't since the cancellation of the show, we have not heard an official statement from Kevin Hart, or for that matter, we have not heard an official statement from the concert promoters over there and those who made the decision to cancel There's only been speculation for the most part, and so be interested to hear. Certainly would be interested to hear somebody come out and say what it is, what really, because there's more than enough people. I mean, this was canceled the day before too. That makes it really suspicious. There was no illness or any type of injury reported on the part of the entertainer Kevin Hart. So his comments have been talked about apparently since December, and particularly over there in Egypt, where they had been bracing for his arrival. And one day before, which tells me that he probably was in Egypt when they canceled it. So
they said this is how we handle Afrocentrics. That was one of the social media comments. It's like, wow.
That is,
Yes.
that's wow. Egypt is an interesting place. We talked earlier about the 1981 assassination of Anwar Sadat and what that did to that country. And if you recall, that assassination was akin to like what happened with John F. Kennedy. It was so public. It was so public, and it was awful. I remember it like it was yesterday. So seeing that footage on television was absolutely it was almost traumatizing.
No matter where we go, even though we are natural inspirations, God-given aspirations, we still just another no matter where we go, So
I want to just say on a positive note too, because Power 96 said I'm teaching about Miss Belva Davis today, and I want to say before Stacy chimes in on that, I want to say it takes on a positive note. I'm a hip hop anniversary. I was born in the year. It takes a nation of millions to hold us people back, and so I really understand that.
It takes a nation of wow.
Yes.
Those are my guys.
Right.
Those are my guys. It is the 50th anniversary of hip hop.
Yes, it is. Yes,
and
it is.
we were fortunate, as before we sign off, we were fortunate to have the architect, really, the Universal Hip Hop Museum chair, executive chair, Rocky Buchanan, visit us in Puerto Rico for the NMPA's Midwinter Conference. He's invited, let it be known, to a special 50th anniversary concert in Central Park that will happen in August. So we're looking forward to that as well. So yeah, Katrina, on a positive note. So, but you know what? One song resonates forever.
Yes,
especially when you think about what's going on, and that is "Don't Push Me" because I'm close to the edge. The message.
I'm trying not to lose my head, right?
Makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I look that and that song was so true then, and it just shows you how timeless it is. All these years later, we talk about the message. But Katrina, thank you for lifting up the situation in Egypt to us. We really appreciate it. Bobby, you got to handle things down in Florida. You got a task on your hands. We looking at the West Side Gazette to take the lead, and I'm sure you will.
And working with HBCUs to do it.
Working with HBCUs. There you go.
I went to 3 HBCUs. I love HBCUs. I just want us to understand. Don't forget where we come from. We were born out of a necessity, So that's my thing. I love HBCUs. The blacker the college, the sweeter the knowledge.
Here we go. Bobby Henry sends us home. The blacker the college, the sweeter the knowledge. Wow. Thanks for joining. Let it be known. We will see you tomorrow.
Thank you. God bless.